everybody. Good to see you. Welcome back. Hope you guys got some much needed rest and you're back ready to go full charge for the next 7 weeks. You guys are going to have to bear with me. I'm not that familiar with Zoom. I've used Microsoft Teams and hopefully I'll learn a lot as we go on, but I really do encourage you to reach out to me if for some reason the materials that I'm providing or the method that I'm providing doesn't work well and you need some additional assistance. I am planning to put in some scheduled times during our regular class period in the near future. That way, as we're getting ready to review for exam, we have an opportunity to interact and you guys can ask questions. My intent is to go ahead and use Blackboard for the exam, same format that you're used to, which would be multiple choice and short answer. I also plan on providing homework, and good for you. You guys will be happy to know that we're not going to have to turn in the entire workbook. I know some of you still haven't turned in previous assignments, which actually is going to hurt your grade. So if that's the case, you need to reach out to me and see what we need to do. But I will provide some online homework that you guys can do and submit on Blackboard rather than doing the other. So right now I'm going to go ahead and the next exam covers two topics, Chapter 8, which is on contractual risk transfer, and then Chapter 9, which is on transferring financial risk. I am going to clean up Chapter 8. It needs some tweaking because that particular topic changes on a regular basis. So I'm going to go ahead and today lecture on Chapter 9, which is transferring financial risk. Let me flip over to the slide deck and we'll get started. I'll share with you guys a little bit about financial risk. So essentially, hold on just a moment. I'm not seeing everything that I wanted. Make sure I've got, I thought I had this shared screen ready to go. Here we go. Okay, sorry about that. Just takes me a little bit. Transferring financial risk. Obviously, when an organization owns or uses different financial instruments, whether that be a bond, a stock, or other financial document, there's always that opportunity or chance that you have financial risk exposure. Things like interest rate, input cost, it could be the market risk, different things that are going to impact your overall success. So anything, if there's any financial uncertainty arising from the effect of different market forces, then it impacts a financial asset or liability such as debt or our cash value of our assets. This would be considered a financial risk. There's actually 3 major categories of financial risk. First being market risk. This is the one where you have an investment portfolio and it actually decreases or it could go up over time depending on the market performance. As we've seen in recent weeks, this is something that individuals all over are really stressed about because they're significantly feeling the impact of market risk. They have a lot of money tied up in their 401k or in their other investment portfolios, and they're seeing major decreases in the market, which impacts them on the bottom line. Another major impact or category of risk would be counterparty risk. This is the uncertainty that a party that you've lent money to or that you're doing business with and they have a binding agreement, they fail to pay or follow through. So that credit risk, usually it's failure to pay up on their obligation on monies that they owe you. That counterparty risk is also something that we are dealing with substantially over the next several months. As individuals and businesses are struggling to remain open or keep staff, they're not getting the revenues. Obviously, we're going to have much higher credit risk than we've experienced in recent months. Pricing risk. So this is that uncertainty of what you can actually set your price in the market, making sure that you've accounted for correct margins that you need to cover your overheads, and we'll get into that in more detail here in a moment. So a little bit more about market risk. There's actually 3 subcategories of market risk. First being interest rate risk. that uncertainty over the movement of the volatile interest rates. Again, something that we're experiencing. Anytime you're in an economic downturn, you may have that exposure. We're watching interest rates go down, but we're also seeing interest rates on our investments going down. So depending on how the market shakes out, this could be really significant, especially if you have large debt, and it could actually improve your financial bottom line, or it could actually really substantially decrease it if you're not earning the returns that you need on your dollars and assets. Exchange rate. If you're doing business in another country, obviously you're expecting cash flows. Probably most of your contracts are set in a foreign currency denomination, that the exchange rate really can have an impact on how well you do and what your returns will be. So just like interest rate, these changes, the exchange rate can lower based on your asset value and can change what your overall liability is. So for example, if you have a dollar, the American dollar, US dollar is depreciated against the value of, let's say, the euro, and we already have a fixed contract in place with a set price, it may actually be a problem, and either the individual on the other end, depending on which way the exchange rate works out, they may actually have to take a bigger hit than your company, or vice versa. If it appreciates, then payments for foreign products may actually increase, and when you're converting those to euro, so just need to be aware of that. Liquidity risk is that risk associated with not having enough cash on hand for immediate financial needs. Again, a lot of businesses are actually experiencing liquidity risk. Maybe they can't make payroll. They don't have the revenue streams coming in that they normally do, and they may actually have to revert to selling off assets they wouldn't normally have to do. And when they do that in a short amount of time, they typically have to take a discount or a reduction in value in order to capitalize on it. A little bit more about credit risk. So credit risk obviously is that person, that counterparty, the individual you're in a contract with, does not have the ability to pay you all the money that they need to on time. Something as an organization, the utility is looking at. I know utilities during this crazy crisis, we are not going to be necessarily shutting people off for lack of payment. However, that is a huge hit to our bottom line. If we have people that are not going to pay their utility bills in a timely manner, obviously we can charge them late fees and interest, but that means that we have dollars that we can't bring in to pay our bills. Also, if you sell or buy things online for credit, that income that you have from that sale. So for example, if you are a distributor of clothing and you sell to a retail market, they may actually take the inventory of merchandise on credit with the anticipation of selling it. If it's sitting there idle and they're not selling it, they may have delays in paying you, their vendor. Anytime you have a loan that's out there that you've offered to someone else, maybe you are the loaner, you're the bank, and that principal as well as the interest that is due on that loan is also at risk. If you lent somebody money for a car and they fail to make the payment, obviously you can maybe recoup some of that value, the principal on the car, but you probably would have difficulty capturing the interest that's due on that particular loan. And credit risk, basically, any way you look at it, either on the asset or liability side, is definitely going to impact your balance sheet and your net worth overall. A little bit more about pricing risk. So as a business, you usually come up with whatever product you're selling. Let's use a good, for example, rather than service. You are manufacturing potentially a product that someone wants to buy. If you're manufacturing it, you have different inputs that go into it. Let's say you're trying to build a shed, a little small shed for the yard. You're manufacturing these small buildings. Part of the input might be wood, could be metals, could be roofing material. If any of those components that go into that cost of making that product go up, then that's going to increase or impact your input price risk. There's that uncertainty of what it's going to cost you. We also are experiencing that significantly in the current crisis, because what we're finding is, as manufacturing businesses are unavailable to fulfill orders, especially international companies, we have to find alternative suppliers, and sometimes we have to pay a premium just to get what we need to make our product. So we don't have a lot of control over input price unless we mitigate it. As a risk manager, a good risk manager would look at having multiple contracts, multiple suppliers. So if one supply chain is not working, you have a backup. So supply chain risk really falls into that. The second part of pricing risk is, how much am I going to get for my product? Pricing and deciding what the market is willing to pay for your product. Obviously, you could always potentially have competition. They may try to undercut you. Maybe a foreign country can actually produce it cheaper, and they're undercutting your margin. So anytime a competitor's pricing is lower than yours and they're cutting into your margin, that is an output price risk. If you price something too high, someone may not choose to buy your product if you price it too high. So you don't want to price it too low, you don't make as much money, and you don't want to price it too high, but that's kind of the sweet spot. You have to figure that out. Okay, derivatives. I know most of you have probably had derivatives in previous financial classes. And essentially what that is, it's a financial contract, and it derives its value from an underlying asset or commodities. A lot of people hear about, natural gas commodity, the selling of natural gas, what the price on the market is. Maybe it's petroleum, could be pork bellies, whatever it is. Tracking could be grain, trying to track the value of that. So based on that price of the underlying asset or commodity, that helps derive the value of the contract of what you have in place to hedge against. It also could be based on an index, such as the S&P 500. So forward contracts or futures, those are a lot of times what we hear about. There's also things called options and swaps, which we're going to cover a little bit more detail here in a moment, and how those can be used to help mitigate some of your financial risk as an organization. Forwards. So, if you're contracting with a contract that's put in place for a forward, you are one party, maybe you're a party that's willing to buy, and there's another party that's willing to sell. In our example, for utilities, we actually purchase natural gas from the pipeline. We are willing to buy it at a certain price, and they're willing to sell it at a specific price. And it actually has a point in the future. So we could actually say we want to look at a forward contract that comes due in 2021. What will gas prices look like in 2021? We can come up and say, even though they're $3 today, we would be willing to pay up to $4 per decatherm, or a unit of measure for gas. And maybe the individual selling it, the pipeline says, you know what, we're not willing to sell it for that. We actually went $4.50. So there's some negotiation. And also there's some uncertainty on both sides. We don't know if the price of natural gas will come in lower. They may actually find out they could have made more money. You could have actually bought it cheaper. But you have to find that sweet spot of where you're both comfortable and putting your risk. The best part of having a forward contract is it minimizes that variability. So you have a high end that's brought down, hopefully, by locking it in, and they have that guaranteed price that they're willing to commit to, as well as you can also kind of bring in that lower end. Now, you get the benefit of the lower end, but your goal is to try to keep costs down. For us, pass-through of natural gas or fuels comes directly to our customers. So if we have to pay more for natural gas or coal to produce power, that cost goes directly to our customers. A lot of our customers are on fixed incomes, and so we try to minimize that variability so that way it's more predictable what their utility bills are going to be. Futures contract is that forward contract that's based on an exchange rate like the S&P. Those type of futures are typically traded openly and have a market value, and they're easily transferred between parties. Some forward contracts are just between two individual parties, and you can't easily transfer them in comparison to futures. This overall forward contract concept serves to reduce the risk of price fluctuations that happen with a particular commodity or a financial instrument that you might have. A lot of times the forward may have to do with the pricing of what's going on in the stock market. I'm talking about things that are more reliant on the commodity, the cost of an input or a major input for our business. Um, this having forward contracts in place, as I mentioned, it's a really good way to better plan, manage, and contain your costs from a budgeting perspective, so you're less concerned about those price variances. A little bit more about options. So these options are potentially available for any stocks or commodities, any foreign exchange rates or other traded commodities. Whoever's holding that option, they have an option to either buy it or they can sell it at a specific price that they have in agreement. This option has been put out there between two parties. Let me mention, so what is a strike price? Strike price means that it's the price at which in the option you've spelled out that you can either purchase, or we call. We're going to call you up and we're going to purchase this particular commodity at a certain price, or you can sell it and put it on the other individual during a particular period. So obviously, if you're the buyer, you're going to utilize that call option. If you're the seller, you're going to utilize your put option if it's in your favor. So whoever's holding that option, either side of it is going to look at the strike price. If the value of your option is higher than what the current strike price is, meaning let's say I can get natural gas, I have a guaranteed call option at $4 and the current market is less than that, I can actually call and say I have the right to buy that asset at a cheaper rate. Maybe it's $3. And even though today it's worth $4 in the market, I can buy it from you because I have a guaranteed option that allows me to buy it at $3. I'm going to call you up and I'm going to purchase that at that lower price. Doesn't put you in a good position, but that is what you've agreed to up front, something that you both can live with. On the other side, let's say the market goes the other way and you've agreed to buy it at $4, or that's the strike price on both sides. And let's say the cost of natural gas right now is $5 per decatherm. You're not interested in buying it because you could buy it for $3. But the person who has that particular option could then put on you or sell to you that at $5, and you've agreed to that. Or, I'm sorry, you've agreed to that price up front of what you could, what you agreed to buy it at. So let's say that value is less than the strike price. They may want to go ahead and sell it to you for more, or to force you to take whatever is whatever the strike price is in your option. Swaps. A little bit more complicated, don't necessarily need to know, other than that is a tool that is available in your toolbox. It is structured so actually it's not really money changing hands in every individual transaction. It's more of a tracking over time of sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, and you've agreed to settle up at a certain point in time. Typically that's quarterly. So no money's actually changing hands except at the end of the period. The cash flows back and forth. So the parties agreed to a term of the contract. Maybe it's set based on an interest rate. Interest rate's higher than what you're paying, they're going to pay you back. Or if it's lower, you're paying them back. But either way, every month or every reporting period, you're going to track who's at the winning side and keep a running tab on your account. Each of you has an account. Sometimes it's going to be more in your favor than theirs, vice versa. At the end of the period, then they will settle up the overall impact financially. If they have come out negatively, then they're going to have to pay you, and vice versa. So again, why would anyone do these? These are typically going to reduce the risk for both parties. It takes out some of the variability and provides some options and guarantees on revenue. The last item I want to talk about is securitization, which is basically the selling or liquidation of a particular asset that you need money, you need cash, liquid assets. So this allows an organization to take an asset such as accounts receivable, where someone owes you money, and actually sell it, or could be a loan, somebody owes you money, and you're going to sell that asset to get cash, liquid cash to pay your bills or whatever you need to do, or maybe you just want to get out of that business and you want somebody else to manage it. Most common utilization of this, I don't know if any of you have a mortgage, probably not yet, but if you did, a lot of times you'll finance your loan, your mortgage with a bank, and then a couple of years later you get, hey, we just bought your loan, so you now owe us. That's essentially a securitization. Maybe the original company decides to sell off your mortgage rate at a certain rate, and the other company's willing to buy it because maybe rates have gone down and they could earn more from what you're offering, and you don't want to carry those additional capital items. You're willing to kind of liquidate it to do other work or other business. So the main feature or method of doing securitization, you have to have a middleman. You've got the frontline company who's trying to sell off or liquidate assets. You've got investors on the other side, and this middleman, or SPV, we call it a special purpose vehicle entity, they are enabling that transfer of assets to cash. They hold the assets, they're buying them from you, holding them, and then they're turning around and selling those assets, a rate of return essentially to the investors, for them giving the cash up front to help fund that. Again, they're still going to hold the asset in their possession, but it allows the transfer in. What else does this do for you as a company? Not only does it give you liquid money, it also takes out the credit risk. So if someone owes you money, or you're still waiting to collect from retailers who haven't paid you for their merchandise yet, you don't have to worry about whether they're going to pay you because you just eliminated the credit risk. That credit risk now sits with the SPV or the third-party investor. The interesting thing about securitization is these are closely monitored in recent years. There was a lot of trickiness going on back in 2007-8 with different mortgages and transfers, and they weren't handled correctly and weren't capitalized correctly. So there's a lot of regulatory requirements around securitization. They monitor them a little bit closer than they used to. So let's talk about a case. I'm going to give you an example. If you're a small business, let's say you've just started a new fitness line, maybe like Lululemon, you're selling athletic wear, specifically yoga type material. And right now it's really hot. Everybody wants to buy that. It's a new trendy item. So, you can produce only so many with the current resources you have. Maybe you have certain distributors that provide it, or maybe you have a manufacturing plant that's putting these items together, sewing them for you in the factory. If you had more available, you could sell more. So you're looking at going, you know what, if I had more cash available, I had more merchandise, manufacturing space, I could actually hire more people and I could put more equipment and we could make more items to sell. So how would I do that? First thing would be is I gotta have more cash. If I'm gonna buy more equipment, if I'm gonna hire more people, maybe I have to buy more materials to get it up and running. So having cash, gotta have money to make money. Where am I gonna get that cash if I don't have it today? Two ways you could probably do that. First of all, you could sell off your company and have people buy partial ownership and give you money in stock money, and then they own part of your company. Another option might be, I'm going to raise cash through debt. I'm going to go to the bank and I'm going to ask for a loan. But there's some risk with that. If I have issued debt, what is some of the risk that would go with that? Well, the thing I would think about is, what if it's a variable rate and I take out a loan today that's worth, it's 3.5% interest, and maybe after this market crash, it goes up to 5%. Now my debt payment has gone up substantially. So I have some interest rate risk there that I need to be cautious of. Excuse me. If I locked it in at a fixed rate, I probably have less credit risk that's sitting there. Another option for cash would be, you know what, I've got assets sitting in the book. I have all this material I've distributed to my retailers. They're out there selling it. Maybe it's Dillard's or Bloomingdale's or whoever's selling Lululemon for me. They haven't sold it yet. It's just sitting on the shelves. Their stores have been closed the last month. So what's sitting on the books? You have accounts receivable. They haven't paid you for the merchandise yet. Maybe it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days out. You don't have the time to sit and wait, but you could take that, maybe take a discount and say, you know what, I don't want to worry about that. I'm going to get the cash that I need out of it, and somebody else can handle the payout of that. Something similar happens too. A lot of times companies will sell off their bad debt. They'll turn it over to a collection company at a discount. And what happens? That credit company or credit collections company gets a certain percentage off of everything they collect. no harm, no foul. They make a certain percent. They don't really pay for it. They get some of it. They get certain pennies on the dollar for it, and you get a minimal amount. But either way, you're giving something to somebody else, potentially for a cut of the dollars, just so that you can get some cash out of it and move forward. Last thing as a business that happens often is you're manufacturing a product or you're buying a product, either way, and all of a sudden your inputs have changed. Maybe you've agreed to sell a pair of yoga pants for $100, and that's probably the max someone's willing to pay for it. Even though it's a great product, they may say that's kind of my tipping point. If it goes over that, I don't really want to buy it. And there's other alternative substitute products in the market. So let's say at $100, that's great. I make a good 30 or 40% margin. But what if the cost of the fabric that I'm using goes up substantially, or I can't get that? Maybe I have to find a new supplier that's much more expensive. That fluctuating price or input price risk would impact me. So what would I do with that? I would, we already talked about, for a loan, you're going to turn around and use maybe potential options. If you're choosing to sell your accounts receivable to gain cash, you're probably going to securitize. You're going to use a special purpose vehicle, an intermediary who's going to sell it off to other investors to take care of and give you the cash that you need. And then if you have fluctuating prices, we talked about, if you're a good risk manager, you're probably going to have multiple avenues of suppliers. But let's say every supplier is going up, the cost in general is going up. What could you do? You could actually put a forward in place, a forward contract, which says, I can buy this material or this particular resource for a period of time, maybe over the next year, 2 years, for a fixed price. They have to agree to sell it to me as long as I have a contract in place. And that kind of locks in my margin. So it gives me a little bit less variability. It gives me a little bit more confidence that I'm going to continue to make money in my business. That's all I have for chapter 9. It's a very short chapter, pretty simple. Making sure you guys understand what the 3 major categories of risk are. And then, essentially we're going to be working on contractual risk transfer, and we'll go back and review this. I also might try to find some other YouTube videos that you guys can maybe get some better ideas on derivatives, just to remind you how they all work, kind of a quick overview of options and swaps and how those typically work. They're not always the simplest to learn, but very useful in a business, especially if you have a good consultant that can help you with what you need to buy and what's available in the market. And with that, hope you have a great night, and I'll talk to you all soon. Take care.